The CH-47D Chinook medium-lift helicopter depends on electricity to operate. Each helicopter has hundreds of individual circuits, both AC and DC. To satisfy its voracious appetite, the aircraft contains 7 buses with 8 possible sources of power. In fact, this aircraft in flight can use as much electricity as a modern home. The electrical installation on the CH-47D is comprised of 2 similar but independent AC and DC generating systems called number 1 and number 2. Each system has the capacity to supply the electrical requirements of the aircraft. Both the AC and DC circuits are controlled from power distribution panels, or PDPs. Each of the circuits in the aircraft is protected by a circuit breaker on one of these panels. The number 1 power distribution panel is located outboard of the co-pilot's seat on the left side of the cockpit. Essentially, it services the left side of the aircraft. The number 2 power distribution panel is located outboard of the pilot's seat on the right side of the aircraft. It basically services the right side of the aircraft. Primary AC power to operate the aircraft in flight is provided by 2 Lucas 40 kVA AC brushless generators that produce 200 volt, 400 hertz, 3-phase power. These generators are mounted on and driven by the aft transmission and are cooled by oil from the aft transmission. The number 1 main generator, mounted on the left side of the transmission, provides AC power for the number 1 AC bus, which is in the number 1 PDP. The number 2 main generator is mounted on the right side of the transmission. It provides AC power for the number 2 AC bus in the number 2 PDP. The number 1 and number 2 generators are identical. They each contain a main alternator armature, shown here, and a permanent magnet generator, or PMG. These generators are the main source of power for the aircraft. When each generator is turning at 12,000 RPM, its PMG produces a 40-volt AC output that is fed to its respective generator control unit. Each GCU monitors its generator for under and over voltage, under frequency, and differential current, and also regulates the generator's output voltage. 3 circuit boards are contained within each GCU, 1 for frequency sensing and control logic, 1 for current sensing and power supply, and 1 for voltage sensing and regulation. In addition, there is an excitation control relay, a generator contactor relay, and a field output transistor. The number 1 GCU is located in the electrical compartment at the front of the left pod. The number 2 GCU is located in the right electrical compartment. The generator control units are connected through switches in the cockpit to contactor relays located in the power distribution panels. The contactors connect the generators to the number 1 and number 2 AC buses. All the individual AC circuits feed off these buses. Each AC system has the capacity to supply the complete electrical requirements for the aircraft. If one of the generators fails, the AC bus tie closes, allowing the other generator to power both buses. The 2 systems are widely separated in the aircraft to minimize losses due to battle damage. When the aircraft is on the ground, all AC power requirements can still be met by use of a 3rd generator, the Auxiliary Power Unit generator. This generator is mounted on and driven by the Auxiliary Power Unit, APU, which provides AC power for ground maintenance. The APU generator is an air-cooled 20 kVA AC brush or brushless generator. It produces 205 volts, 400 hertz, 3-phase power. The APU generator also has a permanent magnet generator. The PMG for the APU generator supplies AC and DC power as soon as the generator starts turning. It, in turn, is connected to its own GCU, which is different from the GCUs used by the main generators. This control unit has 2 plug receptacles on the front. It uses a black conversion plug to control a brush-type generator or a red conversion plug with a brushless type generator. The APU generator control unit contains 4 circuit boards. They are for under and over voltage protection, under frequency, voltage regulation, and differential current. The generator control unit for the APU generator is located in the right electrical compartment. There is a switch for it on the electrical panel, and a contactor and a slave relay in the number 2 PDP. When these relays are energized, they will connect three-phase AC to the number 1 AC bus. Power is then routed through the number 2 AC bus tie to the number 2 AC bus. If it's impossible or impractical to start the engines or the APU, you can still get AC power to the aircraft. There is an external power receptacle in front of the left electrical compartment. It is connected to the external power monitor inside the left electrical compartment. This device monitors the incoming power for proper frequency, over or under voltage, and phase sequence. If the power is acceptable and the aircraft is not receiving power from the onboard generators, the external power contactor in the number 1 PDP connects it with the number 2 AC bus. The bus tie will also connect it to the number 1 AC bus, powering the whole aircraft. If any of the onboard generators start producing power, the external AC is disconnected from the bus. Many of the instruments require 26 volts AC. Power for this purpose is provided by 2 auto-transformers, one in each PDP. The auto-transformers receive 115 volts AC and step it down to 26 volts AC. That completes the AC system, but the Chinook also needs DC power to operate. The DC power system of the CH-47D contains 5 DC buses. 4 of these buses are powered by any of 4 possible power sources. The 5th bus, the battery bus, is only powered by the battery. The CH-47D has a 19-cell, 24-volt nickel-cadmium battery. The battery is used for starting the APU and as an emergency power source in the event that all other power in the aircraft is lost. In emergency mode, the battery will not last long, just long enough for the pilot to land the aircraft safely. Thus, it is important for the battery to be kept at full charge. There is a battery charger analyzer in the left electrical compartment above the battery. A sensor cable from the battery allows the charger analyzer to monitor the battery for cell imbalance, over temperature, voltage above or below 80% of the full charge, and to provide a charging voltage to the battery. The charger analyzer receives 115 volts AC from the number 1 AC bus. It converts this AC to DC to charge the battery anytime the battery voltage falls below 80% of full charge. The charger analyzer is also connected to a warning light in the cockpit. The battery energizes the switched battery bus through a relay found in the number 1 PDP. When the battery switch is turned on, the battery is connected to the DC essential bus and is able to power 3 of the 5 DC buses. The other 2 buses, the number 1 and number 2 DC buses, receive their power from the number 1 and number 2 AC buses by way of transformer rectifiers in the electrical compartments. The transformer rectifier units, or TRUs, operate off 200 volts, 3-phase AC. The transformer in each TRU steps down the 200 volts to 48.5 volts, 3-phase AC. 6 rectifiers convert the 48.5 volts AC to 28 volts DC. Inside the TRU is a cooling fan operated by AC. An AC quick disconnect input connector is located on top of the TRU with positive and negative output terminals located underneath. The number 1 TRU, located in the left electrical compartment, powers the number 1 DC bus, the essential DC bus, and the switched battery bus. The number 2 TRU, located in the right electrical compartment, powers the number 2 DC bus and the essential DC bus. To protect and control the TRUs, reverse current cutout relays are connected to the TRUs. As soon as the voltage coming from the TRU is greater than the voltage from the battery, the reverse current cutout relay, located in the PDPs, will connect the transformer rectifiers to the DC buses. If one of the TRUs should fail for any reason, the reverse current cutout relay will disconnect it from the bus and operate the appropriate TR fail relay, which in turn will operate the DC cross-tie relay to connect the 2 DC buses. There is one other way to get DC power to the aircraft. That is by using external DC. When external 28 volts DC power is plugged into the aircraft, it energizes the DC external power relay in the number 1 PDP. connecting the external power to the number 1 DC bus and disconnecting the TRUs. This, in turn, powers all the DC buses except the battery bus. In summary, we see that the main generators power the number 1 and number 2 AC buses. These, in turn, power the 26 volts AC instrument auto transformers. The number 1 and number 2 DC buses receive their power from the AC buses by way of the transformer rectifiers. In turn, the number 1 DC bus provides power to the essential DC bus and the switched battery bus. The battery powers its own bus and in turn is charged from the number 1 AC bus. If the source to either of the DC buses should fail, there is a bus tie relay that will connect them to restore power. Similarly, if one of the generators fails, there are bus ties to connect the 2 AC buses. At 40 kVA, either generator produces enough power to operate the whole aircraft. If both generators go out, the auxiliary power unit generator can come online, connecting it to the number 1 AC bus. The APU generator is used for aircraft ground operations and aircraft startup only. If all power sources fail, the battery will still operate the aircraft for about 15 minutes. If in flight, this is long enough to set the aircraft down. On the ground, if you don't want to or can't run the auxiliary power unit, you can plug in external power. Plugging in DC will power all the DC buses. Plugging in AC will power the entire aircraft. In use, the electrical system goes from the simplest to the most complicated. The battery allows the auxiliary power unit to start, which powers up the system so that the main engines can start. When the engines get up to speed, the main generators are turned on and the APU generator is turned off. It takes a lot of electricity to operate a Chinook. It's up to the 68 Foxtrot electrician to keep the electrical systems running so that the Army can keep its Chinooks flying.
The Soviet Army, together with its Warsaw Pact allies, represents the largest mechanized ground force in the world today. They are capable of mounting large-scale offensive operations on fronts extending from Denmark in the north to Italy in the south. NATO capability to defend against this force has raised questions concerning both tactics and weapon systems available to our ground forces in this area. This film will portray and evaluate concepts which would help achieve the primary mission of NATO forces, a successful defense in Europe.
The Warsaw Pact nations are capable of employing heavily armored forces against the NATO alliance in Europe. Soviet doctrine stresses that the offense will be conducted from the march by fast-moving tank and mechanized forces. These rapid, hard-hitting, round-the-clock attacks are coordinated with conventional rocket, air, and artillery fires. Small airborne and air-mobile forces may be employed in rear areas. It is estimated that the Warsaw Pact forces have over 20,000 tanks for operations against NATO forces. This represents an enemy tank superiority ratio of about 3-to-1. Their integrated weapons system includes medium and light artillery, medium tanks, air defense weapons, rockets, mortars, and small arms. It is assumed that an attack by the Warsaw Pact forces in Europe can occur through any of the historically established corridors of approach into Western Europe. These areas are watched closely by the Central Army Group, called SENTAG. Allied forces defending against this threat are 2 corps of the 7th U.S. Army and 2 West German corps. The mission of SENTAG is to engage and destroy the enemy as far to the east as possible while conducting a delaying action. The width of these sectors requires defending U.S. ground forces to cover as much as 4 times the normal frontage. Thus, mobile firepower to respond quickly and in force is considered vital to any realistic defense of these sectors. To strengthen the defensive capability of the U.S. forces against the threat, a concept has been developed for the employment of attack helicopters, possessing the capabilities of the AH-56A Cheyenne. These attack helicopters provide the ground combat commander with an added dimension in mobility, a highly responsive, fast reaction, mobile striking force capable of rapid contour flight across the terrain, unimpeded by natural and man-made obstacles. This mobility will make it possible to conduct an effective surprise attack against enemy armor at a time and place of the commander's choosing. Under this concept, attack helicopter units will be organic to a conceptual mechanized infantry division. The combat maneuver elements of the division are as follows: 4 mechanized infantry battalions, 3 tank battalions, an air cavalry attack battalion consisting of both attack and light observation helicopters, and a cavalry squadron. Divisional artillery provides fire support from 155 millimeter and 8-inch self-propelled howitzers. A Chaparral Vulcan self-propelled artillery battalion provides division air defense. The Air Cavalry Attack Battalion consists of 3 Air Cavalry Attack Companies and 1 headquarters and headquarters company. Each company has 3 attack platoons and 1 scout platoon. The conceptual battalion has a mix of 45 attack helicopters and 30 light observation helicopters. The attack helicopters are assigned on the basis of 15 per company and 5 per platoon. The light observation helicopters are assigned on the basis of 10 per company. This mix is tentative and will be examined in greater detail in future experiments and studies. In order to understand the tactics employed by attack helicopters in the following simulation, it is first necessary to realize the full capabilities of the AH-56A Cheyenne. The AH-56A is capable of acquiring and attacking enemy targets under conditions of darkness and limited visibility. It is equipped with an inertial guidance and navigational system, plus surveillance, target acquisition, and night observation equipment. It is responsive to data acquired by ground-based sensors and other intelligence and acquisition sources. This attack helicopter can execute 120-degree turns left or right from the line of fire after firing a tow missile, or hover just above the crest of the hill, while the gunner guides the missile to the target. The tow missile can penetrate any known enemy armor at a maximum range of 3,000 meters with a time of flight of less than 15 seconds. Time of flight for a range of 2,000 meters is less than 8 seconds. The 30-millimeter cannon is capable of defeating lightly armored vehicles, including armored personnel carriers, with an effective range of 3,000 meters. This provides compatibility with the maximum range of the tow missile. The doctrine, tactics, and techniques for the employment of these attack helicopters are applied in the following simulated combat situations. The situations are covering force, main defensive, and counter-attack actions. All tactical concepts portrayed in this film were confirmed by a computer-assisted war game using AH-56A attack helicopters. However, for the purpose of the film simulation, AH-1G Cobra attack helicopters are being used to represent the AH-56A Cheyenne. The situation is, aggressor forces are initiating a major offensive along the West German border. Their immediate objective is to destroy the integrity of U.S. forces in the Fulda Gap area and prevent reinforcement. This could permit the Warsaw Pact forces to hold key areas while negotiating political issues or continue the offense. Under conditions of reduced visibility, the leading element of the aggressor army is approaching the border. The Allied force deployed in the Fulda Gap is a U.S. Army Mechanized Infantry Division with an Organic Attack Helicopter Battalion. Initially, Tactical Air will have the primary mission of interdiction and gaining air superiority. Between 2030 and 2400 hours in late summer, the U.S. Mechanized Infantry Division deploys into field positions in response to a general alert order. A covering force is positioned well forward of the main body of the division. It consists of an armored cavalry squadron, self-propelled field artillery battalion, an engineer company, and a Chaparral Vulcan battery under the command of an assistant division commander. Its job is to cover the major avenues of approach, give early warning, and conduct delaying actions. A, B, and C troops of the Armored Cavalry Squadron are deployed across the division front. D Troop, the Air Cavalry Troop, provides aerial reconnaissance by employing air cavalry teams, each composed of 2 OH-6 light observation helicopters and 1 attack helicopter. 1 air cavalry team performs reconnaissance and security missions in each cavalry troop sector, thus extending the capability of the ground unit. The division commander places the Air Cavalry Attack Battalion under the operational control of the covering force commander, who directs that the battalion deploy forward, positioning 1 company in vicinity of each cavalry troop. At 0300 hours, a report is received from Corps surveillance aircraft that the aggressor tank columns are moving toward the West German border. By 0530 hours, the enemy columns are crossing the border along the entire division sector of responsibility. In order to illustrate the employment of the attack helicopter, the battle action will now focus on C Troop. The Air Cavalry Attack Company is in its forward assembly position, called a logger area, approximately 17 kilometers to the rear of C Troop, but well forward of the main defensive positions. CH-47 Chinook helicopters pre-position supplies at forward areas for use in refueling and rearming the helicopters. At 0600 hours, an air cavalry team continues to reconnoiter the forward area. The attack helicopter provides immediate fire protection to the scouts. The team sights an enemy tank column estimated to be at least battalion size. The lead element of this column has crossed the border. The air cavalry team does not have sufficient firepower to engage a target of this size. So it maintains a surveillance standoff range of about 2,000 meters, avoiding detection by flying nap of the earth. The air cavalry team reports the target with a recommendation to engage the enemy with attack helicopters. As a result, the Air Cavalry Attack Company is alerted for the attack. The commander of the Air Cavalry Attack Company briefs his operations officer. The platoon leaders are rapidly assembled for a mission briefing. Once the battle starts, all platoon leader briefings will be conducted over the radio. The scout platoon immediately proceeds to the target area. It's the job of the air cavalry team leader to recommend holding areas and initial attack positions for the air cavalry attack company. Scouts confirm this information and reconnoiter additional attack positions. The scouts then assume responsibility for the surveillance of the sector, and the air cavalry team proceeds to another area. Once the attack team start the attack, the scouts maneuver to positions where they can maintain surveillance of the battlefield. These positions are either to the rear or flanks of the attack helicopters, depending on the terrain. One platoon of C Troop occupies a delaying position along Route 84. As the enemy column comes into range of ground fires, the ground cavalry platoon leader gives the command to commence firing pre-planned artillery fires and his organic anti-tank weapons. He informs the attack platoon leaders that they are clear to commence their attack. All ground weapons will continue firing while the attack helicopters engage the enemy. Two platoons attack. One platoon, comprised of two light fire teams, attacks the head of the column from the flank and the front on a converging axis. The second platoon, comprised of one light fire team and one heavy fire team, attacks the center and rear of the column. These attacks are timed in such rapid succession as to seem simultaneous. One fire team crests the tree line of a hill and launches its TOW missiles on the column head from the flank. The second fire team crests another hill at the head of the enemy column and launches its missiles. This provides shock effect and confuses the enemy. The attack helicopter, by remaining at or below treetop level, is extremely difficult for the enemy to acquire either visually or by radar. As the battle progresses, suppressive fire can be placed on the target by one aircraft of each team, while the other launches TOW missiles, or one team suppresses while the second team launches missiles. The situation just shown will develop throughout the covering force sector. The terrain, number of targets, and number of attack helicopters employed at any one time will vary. However, the basic doctrine, tactics, and techniques will remain constant. When the enemy forces deploy and return heavy anti-aircraft fire, the attack helicopters disengage. They use this time to refuel and rearm in preparation for re-engaging the enemy as often as he returns to march column formation.
Results of the covering phase of the war game reveal that the initial attack by the AH-56A Cheyennes resulted in 164 enemy tanks and 21 armored personnel carriers destroyed. This was accomplished at a cost of 19 Cheyennes and 6 scouts. Thus, the covering force zone, normally considered to be a delaying zone, in effect became a killing zone. 2 enemy divisions were rendered ineffective, causing a delay of 14 hours. Normal delay expected without attack helicopters is about 4 hours. The most significant fact to emerge in this phase of the action was the early decision to reinforce the covering force with the entire Air Cavalry Attack Battalion. No other current weapon system would have allowed the commander to destroy the enemy at this range while retaining a capability to participate fully in the main defensive battle.
At 1800 hours, the covering force, having accomplished maximum delay, passes through the main defensive positions. Its attached units return to the parent unit control, and the armored cavalry squadron screens the division's left flank. Because of the extended frontage, the division commander places one air cavalry attack company under the operational control of each forward brigade to assist in covering the large gaps which exist between ground elements. New logger areas are selected in the brigade rear, near enough to friendly elements for mutual security. All available natural and artificial camouflage is used. The scout teams receive instructions while refueling and proceed to assigned sectors. Maneuvering forward of the main defensive positions, they maintain contact with the enemy and report that the forward elements of the aggressor forces are just east of the forward battalions. Two attack platoons scramble and are briefed en route by the scouts. Based on this information, the platoon leaders plan their attack. The battalion commander requests suppressive artillery fires on the enemy columns. Other ground forces also take the enemy under fire. The attack helicopters maneuver to engage the enemy. Since the pilot's attention is concentrated on maneuvering for attack, acquiring and striking targets, the scouts provide a degree of security. As the battle develops, the scouts observe that the attack helicopters are receiving fire. They inform the pilots, who begin evasive maneuvers and move to a different attack position. Using standoff tactics, one aircraft engages the air defense weapon, while the lead aircraft launches its TOW missile at the tank. The wingman will engage from a distance of 3,000 meters with 30mm fires, as the lead aircraft maneuvers into position to engage the tank from a range of at least 2,000 meters. At 1745 hours, an enemy tank column forces a breach in the brigade forward defensive positions. Although suffering heavy losses, the enemy is making rapid progress into the brigade sector. The company commander recommends that the 3rd attack platoon be committed at this time. The brigade commander concurs and directs all available suppressive fires on the enemy. Immediately after receipt of the order, the platoon is airborne. The platoon leader makes his initial attack with the platoon on line to ensure maximum surprise.
With the commitment of the 3rd Platoon of the Air Cavalry Attack Company, the main defensive phase ends. During this phase, the attack helicopters provided the ground commander with the capability to respond quickly to the numerous small penetrations along the extended frontage. War game evaluation of this phase resulted in the destruction of 72 enemy tanks and 7 armored personnel carriers at a cost of 6 AH-56A Cheyennes. The mobility, firepower, and responsiveness of the attack helicopters was the key to the main defensive action. Operational control of helicopter teams by battalion commanders resulted in highly effective coordination between ground companies and platoons. The brigade commander was able to switch the attack helicopter teams quickly to the most critical points of the action. However, this should not be considered as an on-call weapon system. Rather, it is a system which maneuvers, acquires the target using information from all other sources, and then destroys that target.
By 2100 hours, the entire division front is under heavy pressure. The enemy forces, with their superior number of tanks, have made multiple penetrations. All the attack helicopters supporting the left flank brigade have been committed. The ground forces, reinforced by these attack helicopters, are successful in holding the shoulders of the penetration, but it is estimated that 2 enemy battalions are now located within the penetration. Reduced visibility at night requires the attack helicopters to increase altitude and reduce speed. The darkness affords them concealment from visually controlled fires. However, electronic countermeasures must be used against enemy radar-controlled weapon systems. Night vision devices used in the AH-56A Cheyenne give it a near all-weather capability. Its firepower equates to the tank, yet its mobility far exceeds any ground system. In effect, the AH-56A Cheyenne provides the ground commander with a highly responsive weapon system available 24 hours a day. The brigade commander estimates that he can contain the enemy for approximately 1 hour. He requests the release of the reserve tank battalion located in his sector, and this is approved. The division commander then commits the 3rd Air Cavalry Attack Company against the penetration. He also orders the reserve brigade to move into blocking positions west of the penetration. The brigade will require at least 2 hours to move to those positions, compared to 10 minutes required by the attack helicopter. Without this means of rapid response, the ground commander would not be able to blunt the penetration while his ground forces maneuver into position. Upon receipt of the division commander's order, the Air Cavalry Attack Company is scrambled. Simultaneously, the reserve brigade begins its movement. The Air Cavalry Attack Battalion commander provides the company commander with a detailed briefing on the situation. All fires of both Air Cavalry Attack Companies are brought to bear upon the enemy force. The ground unit commander controls all fires as he has done in the previous situations. The attack helicopters alternate their return to the rearming and refueling area. This enables the maximum number of attack helicopters to be available at any given time.
By 0400 hours of the following morning, the penetration has been stopped. The enemy columns have withdrawn and the original line of contact restored. The war game assessment of this action resulted in the loss of 50 enemy tanks and 3 armored personnel carriers. U.S. losses were 7 Cheyennes. An analysis of the counterattack action clearly indicated that the attack helicopter was the decisive factor in this battle. It was, in fact, the division commander's only means of applying combat power against enemy armor in a timely and decisive manner. Had it not been for the mobility differential achieved through the Cheyenne, the enemy penetration could not have been stopped. Total enemy armored vehicle losses for all 3 phases of the battle numbered 47 for ground weapon systems and 319 for the attack helicopter. 32 attack helicopters and 6 scouts were lost. This represents a loss ratio of 10 enemy vehicles to 1 AH-56A. In conclusion, the attack helicopter, when employed in conjunction with the main battle tank and other supporting weapon systems, provides the ground commander with a highly lethal, day and night, anti-armor capability. The attack helicopter will permit the Army to exploit new and exciting operational concepts for success on future battlefields.